Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. My name is Andrew Biggert. I'm with the law firm of Venable. We are counsel to ISRI. I'm here today to remind the speakers and the audience to be mindful of the antitrust laws. ISRI has provided a copy of their antitrust policy statement on the various chairs here, and I encourage you to take a look and review it. And let me know if you have any questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg for today's presentation.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you being here right after lunch, and got some exciting presentations for you here today. Our first speaker is Mr. Ekinci. He was born in 1980 in Istanbul, and he studied international business art from the American University in Washington, D.C. He has started his business career in Ekinciler, iron and steel industry, in 2005, and since 2010, he has been actively working as the foreign trade manager. It's my pleasure to bring him to the microphone.
First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to ISRI on my behalf and behalf of Turkish Steel Exporters Association for the invitation to such an exclusive event. It is an honor to be here today with you all. I'm delighted to make this presentation to the world's most respected representatives of this industry. The Steel Exporters Association is a non-profitable organization that represents about 800 businesses, including the largest steel manufacturers and exporters in Turkey. Our association endeavors to develop the industry and expand its trade volume with the aim of accessing free markets and developing a sustainable global steel markets with a focus on fair trade. Today I will be talking about Turkish steel industry, global scrap trade by number, and necessity of global scrap trade sustainability. Here you can see the Turkish export markets. Middle East is number 1 by 33%, Europe is number 2 by 22%, and Africa by 20%. As you're all aware about this graph, this is the world crude steel production. Since 2006, Turkey has been 11th position, and up to 2014, we went up to 8th position, but last year was a little bit worse than other years, so we went back to 9th position, lost our place to Brazil. But hopefully in 2016, we'll take back the 8th position. I'm sorry. Here you can see the different production styles in the world. 75% of world's production is BOF in steel, and 25% is EAF production. But in Turkey, it's a little bit different. Actually, it's vice versa. It's similar to USA productions. Since 2005 to up to 2013, we were over 70% EAF production, and the rest was BOF production. But since then, it's going down, and last year it was 65% EAF production and 35% BOF production, which is obviously not very good for scrap. In this slide, you can see the world scrap used by country. Obviously, China is number 1 and USA is number 2. As Turkey, we're number 5 in this slide. It's by 28 million tons. If we look at by country, however, if we look at by country, Turkey is the by far number 1 of importer of scrap in the world. We do about 20% of the world's imports of scrap. But in the last, especially since 2012, we hit the peak of 22 million tons, 22.4 million tons. but in 2015 it went down to 60 million tons of imports of scrap, which in 4 years a 6 million tons decrease is a big number. But if you look at the last year, especially last year, 2.8 million tons became decrease of 2014 between 2015. And here we can see where we, as Turkey, where we buy our scrap from. Again, USA is number one. We buy about 24% of our scrap from USA. Obviously, that is decreasing also. It was from 6 million tons to 3.8 million tons, but still USA is our biggest supplier of scrap in the world. And if you look at the world scrap export by country, as you can see, USA is number one by far, again. But since 2011, from 24.5 million tons, in 2015 it went down to 13 million tons, which is a big difference. And in the last 2 years, from 2014 to 2015, you can see it's 2.3 million tons of decrease, which is similar to, maybe not direct correlation with the Turkish import, went down 2.8 million tons. And here you can see that USA scrap export by country, which Turkey is again, buys 30% of USA exports, which is the second is Taiwan, and that's from West Coast actually, 12.7%, which Turkey in this case shows that it's one of the biggest, most important customer of USA scrap. Well, the most important thing about our presentation for today is the never-ending race between iron ore and scrap. Because we think that iron ore is the beginning of one chain and scrap producers are beginning of the other chain, where BOF and EAF production is completion of the chains. Depending on the prices difference between iron ore and scrap, EAF mills either become more competitive or they become more weaker. For the moment, scrap prices are still way above the iron ore prices compared to production costs. This puts EAF mills into very difficult positions. Prices force EAF mills to create a new business model, which based on importing billets, slabs, some HBI, pig iron, that BOF mills produce. Billets and slab imports from China, Russia, Ukraine, and starting from Iran, that Turkey imports. If current situation continues, sustainability of global scrap trade is under threat. Scrap producers should always keep in mind that they are in the same boat with the EAF mills. Therefore, it is vital for scrap producers to show empathy on EAF mills. Turkey's EAF mills work with world's lowest possible profit margins, and they never get any subsidization at all. There is no more room left for the cut to production costs. As a result, depending on the price of the scrap, we experience decrease in production. To show these in numbers, as you can see from 2005 up to 2012, we shouldn't count 2008, it's a different year. So from 2005 to 2012, Turkey increased its importing of scrap from 13 million tons to 22.4 million tons, which is a very big increase. And it has a potential to increase more, but in the last, especially 3 years, it came down from 22 to 60 million tons, which I said it was about 6 million tons, which is a very important number. In other hand, billet and slab, especially, as you can see, the red line, it started increasing. Especially last year, it went up 40%, which Turkey didn't import 2.8 million tons of scrap, but it imported 3 million tons of billet and slab, which shows that Turkish end material production is still the same and it's increasing. But if you look at the melting shop wise, the production is going down because billet and slab is much more competitive than scrap. And obviously you can see pig iron, DIR, HBI, these are all going up also by imports of Turkey. And in example, there's more production coming up in Russia for HBI and other things. And finally, as you can see, the first symbol is the universal recycling symbol, as everybody knows. The second one is the universal recycling symbol for steel. But the third one, everybody knows 80/20 is the quality for scrap, but there's no certainty about it. Due to USA being the world's largest scrap exporting country, ISRI has a great importance. Therefore, ISRI has an important responsibility in determining those international scrap standards. World scrap qualities needs to be further standardized, supervised, and certified more specifically. Because every country has its own 80/20, such as American 80/20, British 80/20, Russian 80/20, and so on, European 80/20. So this only causes more uncertainty. In fact, even American domestic and export scrap qualities are not the same. According to the classifications of ISRI, there is supposed to be no such diversity. We really need some sort of unification about this. So if you have any questions, if you want to contact us anytime you guys want, by email, by phone, our information is here. We welcome any suggestions, any information by you guys. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ekinci. I meant to tell you this when I got up the first time, but we're going to go through the presentations, and then we're going to sit up here for a little bit and have a little Q&A back and forth, and we hope to get some questions from you in the crowd also. Our next speaker is Dave Keeling. Mr. Keeling is the Director of Recycling for the Steel Recycling Institute. He has been with SRI in various positions since 1990. His recycling and construction-related activities allow him to travel extensively throughout the United States while supporting the activities of the state recycling organizations and local chapters of the United States Green Building Council. It's my pleasure now to bring up Mr. Keeling.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to speak in front of all of you. I've been coming to the ISRI convention for about 25 years, and during the course of the year, I go to about 40 recycling and or construction conferences, and people ask me, what is the best conference out there? And hands down, it's the ISRI convention. Let me just advance that real quick. Just introduce you a little bit to our organizations. American Iron and Steel Institute is our parent company. We kind of an umbrella organization. It's been around since 1855. It started out as the American Iron Association, and when various technologies advanced in the steel making process, they adapted and became the American Iron and Steel Institute. One of its business units is the Steel Market Development Unit, Steel Market Development Institute, and obviously the name kind of explains its purpose. We are a part of the sustainability group of the Steel Market Development Institute. The Steel Recycling Institute's been around since 1988. I joined in 1990, and it's been a great relationship with ISRI. Here's some information about American Iron and Steel Institute. We are the voice of North American steel industry in various areas there. Our 19 member companies produce about 75% of all steel in North America. We employ about 142,000 people, and our industry supports about 1 million jobs indirectly or directly. Also, just let me mention is that even in tough times, such as the down market we're having right now, our industry continues to invest in its technology. We've gone from kind of the middle of the pack in terms of man hours, in terms of productivity, to leading the world in steel production. The Steel Market Development Institute, once again, is a business unit of AISI. Here is our investor companies, and here is the logos of some of our partner alliances. Let me also mention that if you go on our website, which is on the bottom there, you can see our business alliances that folks we work with, like ISRI, numbers in the couple hundred. Once again, the Steel Recycling Institute, been around since 1988. Not only do we work in recycling issues, but also sustainable construction issues. We also serve as the clearinghouse for life cycle assessment data, and we're working on a number of life cycle assessments, studies, and also environmental product impact declarations for various steel products. And the industry has a great environmental record. Obviously, we talk about recycling. More people say they recycle than actually vote in the presidential election, and with the cast of characters we got up this year, I think it's going to continue the same. We have also reduced our energy intensity by 31% and our CO2 emissions by 36%. We're one of the few manufacturing industries that have done that. Steel is America's most recycled material. We recycle more steel than all other materials combined. And here's our recycling rates from 2014. There's about a year and a half lag between recycling rates. You can see that the materials or the products that we track have been very consistent over the years. Appliances obviously have a very high recycling rate, as do automobiles. Automobile is the most recycled consumer product, and obviously the metals portion of that is the reason why, both ferrous and non-ferrous. Anytime you have a construction site, you're going to see a roll-off container there, and they're going to recycle that heavy melt. Rebar is continuing to grow as more and more concrete recycles. Then we're going to see more and more rebar coming out of that. And then containers, which are steel cans, food, beverage, aerosol, and paint, we have about a 70% recycling rate, and that continues to grow year after year. This is our sustainability vision statement. We're all working together with the help of the scrap processing industry to achieve that. Let me also mention that I heard a quote from a gentleman, a consultant out of Iowa. I think it's very appropriate. He says that recycling is the gateway drug to sustainability. And with your help, that will continue to be the case. A shameless plug for my kids here, kind of a metaphor for the current market situation. On your far left, there's my youngest daughter, Jenna. She's not having fun. I think that kind of shows what our industry, both the steel industry and the scrap processing industry, we're not enjoying ourselves right now. My oldest daughter, Isabel, she looks like she's the cat who ate the canary and having a great old time, but she still looks a little leery. We're not sure when the other shoe's going to drop. I think the Santa Claus there is saying, when's my tea time? And then my other son, he's like all of us. I think we're looking forward to moving through this down period and getting back to better times. So with that, went backwards, sorry. I thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Spencer Johnson. Spencer has been with INTL-FC as a part of the Metals Risk Management team and has been the primary broker for ferrous metals at the firm since December of 2009, during which time he worked to develop a commercial risk management platform for various ferrous businesses, from scrap and raw materials to distributors and OEMs. Spencer also publishes a widely read commentary on ferrous future markets, the FC Stone called Steel Wire, and Spencer received his BA from the University of Texas at Austin. Welcome, Spencer.
Thank you very much, Greg, and thank you to ISRI for having me here. It's always nice to, when you can't fill the podium, to throw a broker up there. I think that usually that's the only chance we have to get a space in these things, and I'm appreciative of it. I wanted to let you know a little bit, very briefly, about who INTL FC Stone is. FC Stone, for short, is a futures commission merchant and swap dealer in pretty much every major commodity market that's listed in the world. We're a member of almost every major commodities exchange in the world, and Our team, the London Metals Exchange team, which is based in New York City, consists of about 14 individuals and works to trade both ferrous and non-ferrous metals, and works with really the entire supply chain throughout both the non-ferrous and ferrous sides of the business. Like Greg had mentioned, I've been working for almost 7 years now to develop risk management strategies for customers of ours that are in the ferrous space. Our experience is that risk management is an underappreciated aspect of ferrous businesses, and it's becoming increasingly important as volatility in ferrous prices continues to increase. Clearly, 2015 was the kind of year where we got a lot more calls inquiring about whether or not there were liquid instruments in ferrous scrap available to our customers than we had in previous years. And I think that the good news is that we have some additional information to provide you with today about what those instruments are and how you can best utilize them. Here's my disclaimer, since, as I mentioned, I'm a broker, which lets you know that from here on in the presentation, nothing further can be trusted. And but beyond that, we do want to pitch our commentary piece. Ed Meir, who's our chief economist for metals, as you probably already know if you deal in non-ferrous space, is among the most respected analysts across all of the major non-ferrous metals. I myself produce a commentary called the Steel Wire, which focuses on ferrous markets. If at the end of this presentation you have additional questions, or you want to just sort of see what are settlement prices doing for futures contracts in the ferrous space, you can contact us, and we distribute our information about settlement prices and what we see as driving the ferrous market free of charge to our customers and prospective customers. So what I really wanted to talk to you about today is our two new contracts that are available. It's interesting. I'm having a little bit of a deja vu. Greg moderated a panel back in 2012, which I was also on. They must have been a shortage then, too. And what happened was we're talking about a very similar futures contract being introduced on the London Metal Exchange last December, as was introduced on an exchange called LCH ClearNet back in 2011. The difference is we feel like this contract has a much better opportunity to succeed, not only because of the current market dynamics in the ferrous space, but also because of support from the exchange, support from market makers, and support from brokers as well, who finally are starting to realize that there is a wealth of opportunity in the risk management space for ferrous, because there are a lot of customers who both need the education about how these markets trade and how they can best be utilized, as well as the execution capabilities, which as banks continue to move out of the commodity space, they're fewer and far between for our customers. So the first of the new contracts that I wanted to talk to you about is one that might look familiar if you've looked at ferrous futures contracts in the past, and that's a Turkish-based HMS contract for 80/20, 1 and 2, standard CFR Turkish priced HMS. And this contract trades in 10 metric tons per lot. It trades on the London Metal Exchange during traditional London hours. The electronic close for these contracts is 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the U.S., and INTL Stone can generally make markets 24 hours in these products. However, we're just starting to ramp up that ability on the scrap side as well. It's something that we provide on the non-ferrous side that we hope to be able to provide on the ferrous side as the liquidity continues to evolve in these markets. One thing that I wanted to mention, as I mentioned briefly at the outset, is that the LME is really behind this contract. And I think that it makes a big difference between an exchange really supporting a contract and an exchange that, has a lot of sort of bullets in the gun to fire, and they'll throw a lot of commodities against the wall and see what sticks. I think the LME is taking a more educated approach here, a more measured approach. And what I mean by that is that they are sourcing liquidity by contracting market makers. So now we have two-way liquidity that we can show really any given day when the market is open. In the last couple of days, just on Monday, for example, I traded about 300 tons of LME ferrous scrap on behalf of customers across about 3 different contract months. And usually the bid-ask spreads on the nearby 3 months have tightened up to the point where they're really starting to attract more interest from the market. It's one thing for a broker to come up to you and tell you, you should take a look at a new futures contract, and by the way, the bid-ask spreads are about $40 wide. That's really not going to move the needle for very many people. What we're talking about with the new LME contract and the kind of liquidity that's already come in is $5 to $6 wide bid asks, and worst case scenario, we've seen maybe $10 wide bid asks on further forward months. So keep in mind the contract has only been around since December, and I'll show you some information about where we've gone from that initial launch. The weaker looking graph on the of the two here is actually for LME rebar. So you can see that between the two contracts that the LME has decided to launch on the ferrous space, the scrap contract has definitely been the one that's been the most successful so far. I mentioned that about 300 tons traded on Monday. We had bid-ask spreads on Monday that were as tight as $2 to $3 wide in some of the nearby months. That was April, May, June, and I believe July, maybe closer to $5 to $6 a ton, but still relatively competitive. And I think this next chart sort of underscores the direction that we've had and what a successful March it was for the contract, which traded, I believe, it was just over 14,000 tons, in March overall. And I think that really when you're measuring the success of a new contract like this, you have to compare it to past iterations of these type of contracts that have come through the pipeline. Even if you go all the way back to contracts that are hugely successful, for example, the LME's aluminum contract or the NYMEX's crude oil contract. These are contracts that took some time to evolve and become accepted by the industry before they really launched into the stratosphere in terms of deep liquidity pools and easy access to those markets. And I think that FC Stone's goal is to try to support this market and really create a product and a viable product that for the recycling industry can use the same way that they use COMEX copper, the same way that they use LME aluminum. The way that you can take risk out of your business by using those instruments is exactly what we want to recreate in the ferrous space, and we feel like the instruments that are out there today may be laying the groundwork for us to be able to do that in the near future. There's one other contract that I wanted to mention. I think the previous presentations have done a nice job of explaining why the LME chose a CFR Turkish price as the basis point for a global scrap contract. Obviously, Turkey is the largest importer of ferrous scrap, and so they tend to set a sort of benchmark. I think the exchanges are also looking at the success of the iron ore contract. When we're talking about iron ore and competing with scrap, it's really no competition in the futures side. Iron ore futures are now so liquid that they are the amount of tons traded in the derivatives markets are almost equal to that's traded in the physical market. And in some instances, slightly in excess of what's traded in the physical market. And we're obviously nowhere near that in the shredded world, but we believe that we have the foundations there to one day be there. And the other contract that I think will help us do that, particularly for those recycling companies in the U.S. that are in the Midwest, sort of west of the Mississippi or on the West Coast, they may take a closer look at the U.S. shredded contract that's to be launched on the NASDAQ. It's a slightly larger contract, 20 gross tons as opposed to 10 metric tons, the contract that trades on the LME. But because it will be based on a shredded U.S. Midwest price, I think that there's a lot more interest, perhaps for our audience here today, and for individuals that aren't doing it, aren't really involved in the export business, but are purely sort of domestic players in the recycling world. If you have more questions about this particular contract, you can contact us. I would also encourage you to contact John Canini, who works for World Steel Exchange Marketing, and they're helping to push, market, and develop this contract with the NASDAQ. Probably the only unfortunate part of this contract is that it's not listed on a more recognizable exchange. I think that more people would have probably heard of it and potentially be setting themselves up to use it if that was the case. But FC Stone is in the works to give access to this contract for our customers, so we encourage you to contact us if you have an interest. A lot of people will be wondering, what is it about this year that you think is more encouraging for these contracts than in years past? Well, I think 2015 was obviously sort of a wake-up call kind of year. There weren't a lot of recycling companies that made money. We had $100 a ton drop towards the outset of last year. I think those kind of things, it's usually sort of that kind of an impetus that causes a sea change in the industry and how the industry thinks about the risks that it has in certain commodity products. Usually it takes a particularly bad year to sort of bring those issues to the forefront. So I think that there have been issues with previous iterations of these contracts. The busheling contract that was launched by AMM never really took off. Previous versions of the Turkish HMS contract didn't take off. But we feel like both the market conditions and the support that these contracts are getting are going to change that. And I hope that you'll get in touch with us if you have interest in more information about these contracts. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, guys. I really did enjoy your presentations. We're going to start into a little Q&A session now, and please feel free, if you would have a question, go to the microphone, and I'll be more than glad to call on you. The questions I'm going to present sometimes will maybe relate more to one person than another, but anybody, please feel free to comment at any time. Mr. Ekinci, we'll start with you. How would you describe the health of the Turkish steel industry this year, and what are your expectations going forward?
Well, in 2016, the start, actually we can see till the first half of 2016 already. It started, in my opinion, better than 2015. And hopefully it seems it's going to go like this. It's not going to be a booming year. As you know, the Turkish economy, the world economy, the political risks that we have in Turkey at the moment and all around us. But I think it's going to be better than 2015. So hopefully it will be like that.
Dave, one of the things we wanted to talk to you about is, how are we doing on the steel recycling front? We saw your chart as far as the items that are being recycled, but is there room for improvement or things that we can do better?
Absolutely. Obviously, we have high recycling rates for majority of the materials, but there's always room for improvement. For example, steel cans, over 2/3 of every steel can gets recycled, but there's 30% that's still going to landfill. And we work with municipal programs, curbside drop-off, and also resource recovery, which is your waste energy facilities, to make sure that they maximize their steel diversion. We have about 5,500 programs that include empty aerosol cans, and been doing it for 20 plus years with great success. We also have about 4,800 programs that include empty paint cans, once again with great success. There's a number of programs across country, curbside programs, that are actually accepting household scrap items like irons, toasters, that type of thing. What I encourage recycling programs to do is always talk to your end markets, always talk to your scrap dealer, and let them know what you're thinking, and work together and find ways to maximize their diversion.
Just kind of a follow-up to that, we've seen, or at least in our region, the local municipalities that were doing the collection, all of a sudden the prices of the commodities have gone down, and what was a positive collection effort has turned into a cost collection effort. What kind of impact do you think that'll have in the short-term future?
Well, I think we always prided ourselves in terms of the steel can prices to be very stable. And they always fluctuated a bit, but they always traded in a certain range, if you will. That range has come down. I like to joke that in recognition of our 28th anniversary, the prices returned to where when we first started. But hopefully they'll improve. But the main thing is, because of magnetic separation, the handling cost for steel is not like other materials. So no matter what type of program they have, steel contributes to a positive and helps offset some of those collection costs.
Mr. Ekinci, where do you see growth markets for the Turkish steel producers, both within Turkey and outside of the country?
Well, in my presentation, as I said, Africa, Europe, and Middle East was the three biggest export regions that we were making. We believe that it's going to be the same, and especially Africa, we're waiting about 6% increase in our exports, and in Middle East probably 4% in Middle East. So we think we're going to increase our export markets at what we have right now.
Good, thank you. Spencer, ferrous market participants have a reputation for being less likely to use hedging instruments. You mentioned that in your talk a little bit, than their non-ferrous peers. Obviously, you believe that's accurate, but do you think the attitudes are changing? And one of the notes I wrote down while you were talking is maybe explain a little bit, even though you touched on it. I think a lot of people are comfortable, for example, with copper hedging.
Right.
And they understand that 8 cents under a November market, they can see that. but you were talking about on the steel hedge, maybe $10 over a future market. Maybe explain that just a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think that the industry can kind of borrow a lot of the same concepts and knowledge that it uses in other commodities that it does participate more in hedging markets in. But I think that the key really is that the pricing system for ferrous needs to adopt a transparent benchmark like the way that copper has, for example. You mentioned, everybody knows what it means if you're paying 20 points under the November COMEX price. But because there isn't a widely established and sort of recognized futures benchmark for ferrous scrap, I think that piece of it is missing when you get into physical negotiations with suppliers and recyclers. There's not a sort of obvious touchstone, and I think that the hope is that the TSI CFR Turkish index price becomes that kind of a benchmark. And I think that that's one of the smart things about the way that these contracts have been developed, is that they've tried to sort of latch on to already accepted index pricing, and that hopefully that convinces or at least reassures the marketplace that you're dealing with a reliable physical transaction number. It's not a manipulatable market, that people in the futures markets who are participating in relatively illiquid markets at the outset can expect that their trades will be settled against a fair price, whatever price people are paying in the given contract month for HMS CFR Turkey or for shredded scrap in the Midwest. So I think that developing those indices and starting to tie more physical business to those index prices will be a huge boon to the success of the futures contracts.
We have our first question. Joe?
Hello? Oh, it's on now. Thanks very much. I had a question actually for Mr. Ekinci. I was really interested in that chart that you showed showing the decrease in scrap imports into Turkey and the increase of the billets coming in. I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more on what the impact of those Chinese billet imports is really having on the local market in Turkey. Thanks.
Well, it's mostly the increase of billets. It came from, I think, 4 million tons to 7 million tons in the last year. It's mostly imported from China. And in our local market, it's just, to be honest, affecting us better because the cost of scrap compared to cost of billets is a little bit higher. So for our profiting wise, it's better for us. But if we look at it in general, Chinese imports, Chinese sales to our markets like Israel, one of the biggest, Egypt, Yemen, the Middle East region, is hitting us also.
We have another question?
Hello? This work? Okay. For Demirhan, we've seen, I guess in Turkey, the tariff imposed on slabs. Do you anticipate the same thing for billets? And if so, what would the effect be?
Well, I believe at the moment some companies want it, some companies don't want it. But in my opinion, we're not going to have anything such thing because right now it's as Turkish import-wise, it's not hitting us. It's not hurting us, let's say, because as I said for the question before, it's helping us profit more right now. But in general, yes, China is a little bit hard for the whole world economy and whole world steel industry. I hope that's...
Thank you. Dave, I want to go back to one more time on the recycling rates. You know, what steel products have the lowest rate on the recycling, and what can we do to maybe improve upon them?
Well, there's a lot of obsolete steel products that have challenges, we'll say. If you look at oil filters, mattress springs, even tire wire, they all have handling issues that need to be worked out through the scrap industry. The one product that I get asked about almost every single day is propane cylinders. And obviously there's a compressed flammable gas there, there's a sealed unit there. It's good steel, but obviously they need to be handled appropriately. When Walmart was on its sustainability kick a number of years ago, they brought in their two major suppliers, Worthington Industries and Coleman, and asked them to develop a retail exchange program similar to what you see at Blue Rhino. And they had a plan for a pilot program, and when Walmart's attention was diverted elsewhere, the whole thing stopped. When I visit the material recovery facilities, you'll see kind of a most wanted list of materials they try to take out before the machines start working, and one of them obviously is propane cylinders. Now I ran into a MRF operator in Wisconsin who said he thought that the best place for an errant propane cylinder was with the steel cans in a baling chamber if you have good housekeeping and are prepared for it. I'm not sure that's the answer, but we're still trying to find some solutions.
I would agree with him. I don't think that's the right place for it either. Let's look a little bit, either Dave or Spencer or anybody else. How big of a threat is aluminum to the steel consumption in this country, and what are steel producers doing about that that you see out there that will make a difference?
Well, I mean, I think that, obviously CAFE standards have put a tough burden on automotive producers, and they've got some hard decisions to make in terms of, how they're going to be going about lightweighting vehicles. I think that, our anticipation is that the steel industry is going to do everything it can to try to develop high-strength steels that are lighter in weight to be able to compete with aluminum. And I think that what we've seen so far is that there's a good chance of that. I think that there'll be some substitution in the near term, but I think long term, the prospects of high-strength lightweight steels are probably pretty good.
Any thoughts, Dave?
I like to give kind of an official response and then more of a personal response. We compete in all of our market sectors with other materials. Packaging, it's paper, plastics, and aluminum. And obviously construction, it's concrete and wood. And the wood industry is trying to build taller buildings despite common sense and a little thing called fire codes. But we're also obviously in automobile production where we compete with aluminum, plastics, and maybe someday composites. Every steel company or a member company is working with the automotive OEMs, either on their own or through the Auto Steel Partnership, which is one of our partner alliances. One of the most successful programs under that Auto Steel Partnership is a thing called Great Designs in Steel. It takes place in mid-May in Livonia, Michigan, where we invite 1,200 automobile engineers and designers to come in and talk about how to use advanced high-strength steel in their new designs and things like that. Matter of fact, a few years ago, Manny Bodner, who was chair of the Design for Recycling Task Force, and a couple of ISRI staff members who helped that task force, came to the Great Designs in Steel, basically to see how they can extend that message to the OEMs about design for recycling, and also how we can incorporate that into our programming and into our expo. So we're looking forward to that opportunity in the future. Now, a little, I guess, a personal aside, I encourage all you to let me step back. There's a lot of steel in the F-150. That's what gives it its strength and security. I encourage you to go Google military-grade aluminum, and you'll find, if you go past the commercial postings and things like that, there's no such thing. When the armed forces want to specify military grade, they specify steel. Military-grade aluminum doesn't stop flying shrapnel, let alone an errant shopping cart in your Walmart parking lot. Let me also say that if I'm buying a full-size pickup truck, I want a V8 engine. If good mileage is your number one prerequisite for a vehicle, I suggest you look at a minivan. That's a personal opinion.
Mr. Borsick?
For Dave, one of the things that it would be helpful if we got from your investing partners was a little better transparency on steel mill operating rates. It's really difficult to tell when you get a number, 65% or 72%, how that's spread. Is it where are the integrateds in it as opposed to the EAFs, and where is the true demand side? On recycling of the difficult products, you and I have talked about aerosol cans in the past, but certainly the challenge is they may be residential and not a problem at the MRF until it becomes, on the processor's basis, become a hazardous waste processing site. And secondly, used air filters or oil filters, where if you look at the max standards of your representative companies, they can't take them, even if they're drained. that I believe the standard for a non-air filter is either incinerated or the paper is removed and there's no oil on it. Otherwise, even if it's a crushed and drained, it's still an air filter and doesn't make the mills compliant with their scrap management practices.
I think because of the fact that some of our members are EAF and some of our members are basic oxygen furnace, there's a fine line that we need to tread. And obviously with life cycle assessment, which we're very active in, there is more transparency there going forward. As far as the oil filters are concerned, I think that our member companies kind of got bit a few years ago when they were allowing roll-offs, if you will, full of spent oil filters coming in, and there was a lot of excess oil in the bottom of those roll-off containers, and so they got a little bit of trouble with their air emissions and things like that. So I think they're all proceeding very cautiously. Obviously, when the scrap prices are where they're at, they can be a lot more selective in terms of the different materials they bring in, and we'll just say a lot less progressive in experimenting with other materials.
Well, and I would also throw out there that I think at ISRI, we'd be more than glad to work with the steel industry to find ways to recycle some of those products that are extremely difficult by doing tests and doing other things. And the operating rates was actually a discussion that came up in some of our meetings earlier this week. So I think it's difficult for us to understand what 71% means. It's 71% of what? So any clarity that you can give us as we go through this process, that would be great. Yeah, our new boss, Mark Thimmons, who's in charge of our sustainability group, he met with Robin and a couple of ISRI staff members last night, and we are making a point to get together and talk about how we can help each other in the future. Great, thanks. I see we have another question.
A year ago in Vancouver, there was a workshop on fracking pipe. A year later, is there anything new on that front on fracking pipe getting into the scrap stream?
I guess what's new is oil prices went, and the market for oil piping just basically disappeared. And it's a tough business. It seems like a lot of that piping is going to remain in the ground and not come into the marketplace, if you will. So I can chat with you later on one-on-one, and we can talk some more about it.
And I think in some of our ISRI workshops, we've talked about safety precautions on handling that type of a product, so ISRI may be able to help you with some of that information also. Mr. Ekinci, I wanted to get back to you and talk a little bit about your comments on the 80-20 and maybe coming up with a better standard that's a little bit more internationally recognized, and I'm sure that's something we can get with Joe and be more than glad to work with you on. But are the Turkish steel producers generally satisfied with the scrap that they get from the United States, and is there anything that we can do as exporters to make it better?
Well, some of my suppliers are here, so what can I say? To be honest, I mean, as quality-wise, personally, I've been purchasing our company's scrap since 2006. Quality-wise, USA scrap is the best quality scrap in the world, we could say. Because if you look at the prices, 80-20 prices, the highest for USA scrap. So in general, we're happy about it, but again, the most important thing in a production-wise is the impurity. In our opinion, in the last couple of years, the impurity levels of USA scrap is increasing also. So that's one of the things that it should be fixed, or we should do something about it. But in general, we're happy about it.
Okay. Dave and Spencer, how would you describe the health of the steel industry today, and what are your expectations going forward? I know one of the things we talked about when we first got up here, we were talking about the supply imbalance that's out there today, and it'll be interesting to see how long that imbalance exists and what continued impact it has on the marketplace. But what's your thoughts on the health of the industry, and what do you see as far as your expectations going forward?
Well, I'll go ahead and start if you don't mind. I think that, obviously 2015 was just a very difficult year, to say the least. Not just for the recycling industry, but for the steel industry generally. And it's nice, I think, everybody's happy to see steel prices rebounding as we start heading into the spring here. I think a lot of that, and a lot of the, if you look at the futures markets for contracts like hot rolled coil, the spot price already were above 450, and the futures price is pricing in an additional $40 a ton upside. We were trading, third quarter hot rolled coil futures above at around somewhere around 490 on last check. And I think that what that tells me is that the market continues to expect that supply tightness in the scrap world will force mills to raise end product prices if they're going to want to maintain their margins. And I think that I was just mentioning to you when I got on stage here that I got an email from a customer noting about another mill price increase of $40 a ton that was announced today. And I don't think that it's hard to separate out those type of mill price increase announcements from the scrap settlements each month going continually moving higher. We had a big move up in April, and I think that the expectations are for the market anyways for the momentum to continue, at least until we start to see prices rise to a level where flows again start to pick up in a big way, and some of those imbalances can be corrected. So I think that the mills are going to push as hard and as fast as they can this summer. And I think that they're going from obviously a particularly rough period. Lows. We touched lows on steel prices that were below what we saw during the financial crisis, which is hard to believe. And yet that's where we were trading, 355 to 365 range on hot rolled coil at the lows, and up almost $100 from there. I think clearly you can say that the health of the industry is improving, but I think it's extremely tenuous. And I think that the sort of drive up that we've had being at least in some part based on rising raw material prices, not just scrap picking up, but also iron ore starting to pick up in the last couple of months as well. Those aren't always the best reasons to see higher prices. I think that what we'd like to see obviously is a more demand-driven kind of a rally, and I think until that materializes, the steel industry is still in sort of troubled waters, to say the least.
AISI compiles and publishes a lot of statistics, and I think three of them are pertinent in this discussion. Year-to-date, raw steel production was approximately, this is week ending April 2nd. Raw steel production was approximately 23.1 million net tons for an average capacity utilization of 70.6%. That's slightly down about 3% from a year ago. The U.S., at least the domestic steel industry, likes to operate about the 75th percentile. A few percentage points here or there doesn't seem like much, but it's a difference between full order books, breaking even, and making a profit, or our current situation. We also track import data, and the import finished steel is about 25% last week. It's down from its high in the mid-30s. So we like to see that, but at the same time, it's still much higher than its normal range in the mid-teens, so it's still causing an issue. Now, let me just mention that, to back up what Spencer says, is that we've seen an increase in terms of raw steel production the last few weeks, and we've seen an increase in capacity utilization. I think it's the trend's going the right way, but I think it's too soon to hang your hat on that.
Well, let's follow that up with probably something that's caused some of this reaction in the marketplace, which is the impact of the anti-dumping cases on the domestic market. And it's my understanding when those cases are finally levied, that it's a 5-year window. So that's a pretty large window, and I just wanted to get your feel for the impact over the coming years. Yeah,
that's a great, trade cases are a big part of the story in steel pricing, or prices rallying, and I think that again, not a demand-driven rally, which would have been much better, but certainly the mills will take what they can get in terms of whatever will help them achieve a better sales price. And it's unfortunate. It's obvious that there are certain countries out there that are unfairly exporting steel, and I think that there are a few kind of key countries that got hit with big trade suits. The anti-dumping duties that were levied against Chinese cold rolled, for example, were just massive, and I think necessary. And I think that that helps try to create a somewhat more level playing field for the U.S. mills to operate in, and that's better for everyone. But trade cases are not going to be the solution to the domestic steel industry's woes. They're sort of one thing that will be a huge help, particularly in the near term. But imported steel is like kind of a whack-a-mole game. I mean, you can target certain individual countries, but you're never going to completely turn the spigot off when it comes to imported steel. And the Commerce Department is always going to be one step behind in a process of trying to do that. And I think that until you get a more demand kind of fundamentally driven rally in prices, the trade cases are nice and they're having a good effect. And I think the mills are thankful for the decisions that have been handed down, and certainly some of them are crucial. But I think that in terms of whether or not they're a long-term remedy for the industry, I would say probably not.
Just a quick comment. Our AISI public policy staff is very active in this arena. I think that it seems to be the same offenders, the same cast of characters, finding a way to get around past trade resolutions. So we're hopeful, but at the same time, we're leery.
Mr. Ekinci, wanted to ask you, what other obstacles are facing the Turkish steel producers today, and what impact does it have on an industry that there's so much unrest in the Middle East, and if that were to settle down, what kind of an impact would that have?
Well, let me go for the second question first. For the Middle East part, Iraq especially, Iraq was our biggest exporter country for the last 4 years. But since 1.5 years ago, as you're aware, it went down very low, and I think we were doing about 1.5 million tons exports to Iraq, but right now it's about 500,000 tons. But when this terrorism started there, the war started there, it went down dramatically, but right now it's improving. And it's not just Iraq, all around Turkey right now, especially in Turkey also. There's fights going on, so it's affecting our steel industry, but hopefully in the near future, if these markets open up, I believe we're not going to need any Africa or Europe or USA. We're just going to be able to supply those markets. If we look at the anti-dumping cases, I mean, the newest one, they got small margins right now, but we believe that it's just the calculation has changed. Since the last 20, 30 years, the calculation was made somehow, but right now they changed it. So maybe that's the reason we got it, but as you look at the past years, as anti-dumping, compared to other countries, we're receiving zero, or some companies are receiving very low numbers. So it's not, for us, it's a good thing, because the countries are taken out of our competitors like China, Mexico, or other countries. It's good for us, but it's good.
We've mentioned China a couple times, so let's talk on that for just a little bit. China continues to talk about restructuring their industrial sector, including cutting back on excess steel capacity. I think everyone's a little leery if that's actually going to happen, but if it does happen and they do start cutting back, what kind of an impact will that have, both in Turkey and in the U.S.? And as we heard the other day at one of our meetings for ISRI, the excess steel capacity in the world today is estimated to be around 700 million tons, of which 350, 400 million of that is in China. So I'll let you guys comment on that.
Well, I mean, I think that obviously it would be a huge boon globally for not just the U.S. or the Turkish markets, but for every every steel producing country that China ends up dumping steel on, would hugely benefit from a reduction in capacity. Now, whether or not there's the political will to close down mills, lay people off, make the kind of hard decisions that are necessary for that to happen, it seems sort of less likely. It always seems like there's something that happens that allows the mills to sort of defer doing that, or making those kind of decisions. I mean, this year, I think the very unexpected increase in domestic Chinese steel prices has been a huge help to domestic Chinese producers, but maybe not in the long run. Certainly, it's been beneficial for them in the near term to have a decent price surge and more profitability for them. But I think that it sort of encourages some of the people who are still hanging on by a thread to continue doing so. And I think that maybe a more pronounced recession in steel prices that would have been more prolonged this year might have cut out even more Chinese production. I think that also the environmental issue will come into play very soon in terms of, what's the willingness or the sort of ability of steel mills to continue, the kind of production levels that we're seeing and the kind of pollution effects that are resulting from that. When is there going to be stronger pushback against that sort of thing? I think that inevitably is, right around the corner, really, unless there's going to be, cutbacks. I think that there's only so far you can push that.
I think this is not new rhetoric coming from China, but time will tell. It's my understanding that the government there is making the cost of capital a little more expensive, especially to the more non-competitive facilities over there. I think Spencer is right. The economic realities and also the environmental pressures may force some movement, but it's going to be slow and incremental.
Any thoughts, Mr. Kinsey?
They said everything. So.
Okay. Mr. Ekinci, I wanted to ask you about the impact of the dollar. The dollar obviously has been very strong. It seems to be weakening a little bit, and hopefully that's a trend that will continue. But what kind of an impact does that have when you're looking to source scrap?
Well, dollar being strong, if you look at it, if you can look at it different ways, but dollar being strong is making Europe and United Kingdom more competitive on scrap. So it's good for us, but in other case, it's changing our costs. It's local market is a little bit more. In average, it's the same thing for us. It's not a very big difference, but if you look at only scrap, it's making Europe and UK more competitive in the market.
Dave, what kind of new steel products do you see coming into the supply stream that are likely to pose the toughest challenges for the recycling industry?
I'm glad you asked that. The new advanced high-strength steel are obviously much stronger. They're enabled the automobile manufacturers to use a thinner parts, if you will, thereby achieving their mass reduction goals. One of the concerns is that these new steels are so strong that they may cause some concerns with the older shredder equipment. At one of the presentations I heard earlier this year, there was a first responder from Texas who mentioned that if you have a vehicle that you purchased in the last 5 years and you are in a major crash, your chances of surviving that crash have increased exponentially. He also mentioned that because of the stronger steels in the automobiles nowadays, that you'll survive the crash. We're not sure if we can get you out of it because the jaws of life don't work as well. So we are working with the first responders, as is the automobile manufacturers, to help them improve their extraction techniques. So that's a concern right there mostly, is being able to work with the new steels coming down.
We continue to see steel makers in the United States divest their assets while an increasing number of scrap yards have closed their doors or idle capacity. Do you think more consolidation is coming in both industries as we go on in this year?
I can speak more to the steel side probably than the scrap side on this question and say that, obviously the last 20 years for the U.S. domestic steel industry have already seen a massive amount of consolidation, and yeah, I think that there's more to come. I think that, there are sort of, not just the distinction in terms of types of production between blast furnace operators and EAF producers, but also geographical reach, the ability to move steel inland. I think that some of the new capacity that's going to come online here in the U.S. and some of the technological improvements will continue to help. But I think that that we should expect more consolidation on the mill side.
I think that I'm not sure if you'll see more vertical integration in terms of steel companies buying scrap processing facilities, but I think you'll see a closer partnership with your industry and also with our industry because we want to ensure that quality material coming in. I like to put it pretty succinctly, saying that what's good for the steel industry is good for the scrap processing industry as well.
Spencer, I'll ask this. It may be a loaded question, but I'll ask it anyways. You talked about several different hedging instruments that are out there, and of course, I think there's still a few more in the pipeline to come on. But yeah. Which one do you think will catch on And I think you touched on it in your presentation, but maybe explain on that.
Yeah, I think that a Turkish basis point for a contract makes the most sense in terms of global reach of the contract. I mean, we've got a number of different exporting countries that export scrap to Turkey that would like to see a contract that would be priced basis, a CFR Turkish port kind of price. So I'm thinking about it more on a global level, and I think that most of the major scrap exporting companies, the larger companies, also sort of have an eye on that Turkish price, and that might help that contract take off. But that said, I think that there's really two contracts that I think will provide two different types of hedging services, and I think that the LME contract provides a good sort of basis point for a global ferrous scrap price. But I think that the contract, that the TSI price that's going to be listed on NASDAQ for a U.S. domestic shredded contract might offer the most potential to domestic recycling companies, just because of the fact that, if you're not in the export game, you might not have a tight correlation between the type of scrap that you particularly are dealing in versus, what's driving the export markets. And I think even though, most scrap is yearly competing between those two spots, it's going east to the dock or it's going inland to a mill, I still think that there's an opportunity for both contracts to succeed, but first mover status also probably goes to the LME contract. Usually in commodity futures markets, the first person to get their contract listed and the first person to exchange to get their contract listed and get people trading it has a competitive edge over the others, and so in that sense, maybe you would give a slight edge to the LCA or to the Turkish contract that's on LME.
Dave, any thoughts on that, or what's the steel industry's feelings on hedging? Do they see it as a potential tool that they can utilize?
I think that anything that takes the peaks and valleys out of our scrap supply prices, I think they're all in favor of.
Okay. Mr. Borzek?
A little earlier, you mentioned scrap. We were discussing scrap quality, and I think you used the term impurities. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate, just so I understood what you meant by that term.
Well, impurities as dirt, plastics, because it's usually in USA it's a little bit, but in general, if you talk general, the contracts give 0.75% allowances, and some companies try to use this. It's like their right to put that much. I mean, it doesn't mean you can put that much. It just means if there is that much in the scrap, you can do it. But some companies try to use that.
Okay, so in this particular definition, it's non-metallics as opposed to alloys or anything like that. Okay, thank you.
And this would be for all of you. In looking at the global marketplace, let's say that the Chinese steel industry does start to pull their volume or their capacity down. Where do you see, or which countries will that have the greatest impact on, and where do you see which regions or which countries would likely pick up a little bit of that slack?
I think the world. Probably. I mean, it will affect us also because we lost about 17% of our exports in some regions, depending on where China entered for our customers. We lost 17% of our export to them. So that will be something we'll regain, which is a very important thing for us.
And I just want to touch on that, and I think it's important for the crowd to understand, is the China impact is just not dumping steel, it's dumping of other products that impact you in multiple ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other thoughts on that, guys?
I mean, I think that other steel exporting nations in East Asia are going to be huge beneficiaries of it, particularly probably South Korea, and I think also some of the steel exporting countries in Southeast Asia would see a nice boom. And I think that what we're already seeing from some of our customers who are telling us that, in the wake of the cold-rolled cases against China and some of the anti-dumping duties that have been handed down, they're starting to source steel from countries that they had never expected to be sourcing steel from. Many of them not countries that we traditionally think of as steel exporters even. And so I think that, that change is already underway, and I think it would just be, accelerated by a reduction in Chinese capacity.
Actually, let me add
Sure.
one more thing. As we were talking about China, if their environmental things, we talked about this and the market started going up. If it's really they did something, if they cut production seriously or they did something about this environmental thing, even the talks does this, probably that will do much more.
Good point. Good point. Another question?
Yeah, hi, quick question for Spencer. You spoke about the CNF price of Turkey being the basis for LME pricing, but as much as we talk in our industry about CNF prices for Turkey, and we use that as a guideline to sort of point where the market is going, we also use the CNF price for containers for Taiwan pretty much as much. So do you see any chance for an introduction of that price?
I think it would be great if there was, because right now, you're exactly right. When we talk to people who are in the export market off the West Coast, there isn't a lot there for them. The problem is going to be what exchange has the appetite to launch it, and more importantly, what's the index price? I think with the CFR Turkey price, the TSI has sort of stepped up and said, we have a very robust methodology. A lot of people, believe in the way that we develop these prices. It's been successful for us in iron ore, and so they have a benchmark that they can go off of. I think if there was a supportable benchmark for a CFR Taiwan price, and there was an index that was published, and the exchange could pick up that index, I would hope to see them develop a similar contract for a Taiwanese price, so that we could provide additional risk management tools to those of us, those customers on the West Coast who would benefit more from that side of things.
Thank you.
Well, I really want to thank the panelists for coming today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you guys have too, and thank you for coming today, and look forward to seeing you at some other meetings this afternoon. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.